Welcome, everybody, to tonight's webinar. My name is Andy Rozak. I'm the Senior Director for Emergency Preparedness at Child Care Aware of America. And we're very excited to have you on tonight's webinar. This is part of our 2018 webinar series that we proudly present with the National Association for Family Child Care. So thank you very much for joining us. Tonight we're going to be talking about a difficult topic, but unfortunately a topic that we need to talk about, and that is keeping kids safe. And we're going to review the basics of active shooter response for child care programs. So thank you for all of those who have logged in and for those of you who are watching the webinar on the replay. Let me first start off by saying that a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight, as well as a whole host of other emergency preparedness, response, and recovery resources, are available for free on our website at childcareprepare.org. So if you are looking for preparedness resources or tips or tools, I would encourage you to take a visit to our website. There's also a big button there at the landing page that says request training or technical assistance. So if you need to get a hold of us for any reason or have a question or would like some training, please use that button. That will go right to our inbox and we will get back to you in a very timely manner. So everything you need right there on childcareprepare.org. I encourage you to stop by and visit there if you haven't visited there lately. We're always updating it. And also while you're there, check out the other materials. We've got information on the upcoming webinar series, as well as our free emergency preparedness listserv that you can sign up for, and also our mobile texting pilot, which we'll talk a little bit about. So a whole host of resources there that you should get familiar with. Speaking about our emergency preparedness webinars, as many of you have known, we've been doing a whole host of webinars already this year. We've got a few more left to go. We've got a really special treat next month on July 23rd. Let's Get Ready, Planning Together for Emergencies, and that's going to be co-hosted by our great friends over at Sesame Street. So we'd definitely encourage you to stop by and check that one out. That'll be on Monday, July 23rd, and that, again, will be at 8 o'clock at night, just like this one is today. And then in August, we've got one about emergency supply kits, knowing what to pack in your supply kits and also where you should keep your supply kit. So these are all free. I encourage you to take advantage of them. If you can't join us for the live webinar portion, we do post these and you can go back and watch them at your leisure on demand. Again, all of this is located at childcareprepare.org, and this is in collaboration with our friends at NAFCC. So we thank them very much for their partnership on this webinar series. Okay, I know a lot of folks are asking about certificates and credits and all that kind of stuff, so let's get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty of what that looks like. Tonight's webinar is going to be recorded and will be posted on childcareprepare.org within a week. You can also find archived versions of all the other webinars we've done up there on that website, so feel free to go back and take a look at those. The certificates of attendance will be issued by NAFCC and will be emailed within 2 weeks of this live webinar. So they'll be sent out to the email address that you have registered from, and those will be issued for those. If you need CEUs, continuing education units, you must access a quiz and pass with an 80% or above. We're going to send out an email within 24 hours of this webinar about the folks that need CEUs in the quiz. So if that's relevant to you, take a look out for that email. Or you can also go to this website here, nafcc.org/webinar-CEUs, to find out more information. But to get that CEU, you will need to pass a quiz. So make sure you're on the lookout for that as well. Okay? All right. So for tonight, just for the sake of simplicity, we've got all the lines have been muted. However, you can type a question or a comment or anything like that into the comment question box. We'll be taking a look at all those as they come in. We'll be addressing all those as much as we possibly can in the time allotted tonight. If we do not get to all the questions, we'll try to follow up with you directly with an email response. But we're definitely going to be able to, respond to your questions. We'll see them coming in and see them live. So for those of you who are listening on the computer, hopefully you're able to hear very good and turn your computer audio up. For those of you on the phone lines, hopefully that's coming through as well. It seems like it's working on this end. So just to kind of put a key on that point, if you want to do questions on your kind of right-hand side of the screen here under your webinar navigation toolbar, there's a little box here that says questions. If you just tap on that, you can tap on that little arrow and that'll drop down. You'll be able to type your questions right in there to the box. So that's the best way to get in touch with us if you have a question. Please utilize that. We'll be watching the question as they stream in, and we'll be trying to answer all those that we get tonight. Okay. Okay. So a little bit about me. My name's Andy Rozak. I'm the Senior Director of Emergency Preparedness at Child Care Aware of America. I've been in this job for about 3 years. Prior to my service here at Child Care Aware of America, I worked for the National Association of County and City Health Officials, where I worked with local public health departments throughout the United States and worked on environmental health, pandemic preparedness, and catastrophic response issues. Prior to that, I was in Indianapolis, Indiana, working with the Marion County Health Department and the Health and Hospital Association there as Senior Preparedness Advisor, and worked on Super Bowl 46 and also the Indy 500. I also had a stint at HHS as a senior advisor, and I started this whole life off as a firefighter paramedic back in the Chicagoland area before I went to law school. So I'm deeply invested in these issues. I care a tremendous amount about emergency preparedness and response, and really want to make sure that you get the information that you need to take back to your program to make you and your kids as safe as possible. So that's what we're gonna look at tonight. I will say that tonight's webinar is a very, very condensed version of our 4-hour training that we do. We do have a 4-hour training on active shooter and violence for child care providers. This has been a project we've been working on for about the last year and a half, and we started this. We did a survey of the landscape. We also stood up an advisory committee made up of mental health and public health and folks like Sesame Street, Walt Disney Corporation, and FEMA. So a whole host of experts to really inform our curriculum. So obviously our 4-hour training is much more in depth. We are going to try to cover just some of the basic themes tonight, but if you are interested in having us come out and do the 4-hour training in your neck of the woods, please drop us a line over at childcareprepare.org. There's a button right there on the homepage that says request training. Just click on that button and let us know where you're at, what your needs are, and we'll definitely try to get out to your neck of the woods and do the training for you. Okay. All right. Well, I want to start off and just acknowledge how unique child care really is. If you think about active shooter, many of us have seen the courses that are out there for high schools and for churches and for synagogues and even businesses to some degree. However, we're the only ones that are doing an active shooter course for child care providers. And one of the reasons for that is just because child care is just so unique. If you think about, where child care takes place, I mean, we've got everything from, a standalone building to a family child care provider providing care in their home to, folks that are located within businesses or located within schools or located within churches, and even some folks that are located within strip malls. So, each one of our venues is going to be a little bit different. And some of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight, may apply to your setting, but may not apply to your setting, may apply to somebody else. So we're going to talk, kind of broadly, but I'm really confident that some of the stuff we're going to talk about will be applicable to your setting. But I did just want to put that out there and make note that, we are a very unique sector when we think about where the provision of child care takes place for children on a daily basis. If you've seen one child care program, you've seen one child care program. So very, very unique situations. Another part of our uniqueness is, we don't have a lot of the same resources that some of our counterparts do. So, when people talk about putting, police officers or armed guards or metal detectors or those kind of mechanisms in place at schools and universities and other venues, there's not a lot of child care programs that are out there that are going to be able to afford that kind of, mechanism or that kind of personnel to come in and do that. And I think we have to acknowledge that as well. The other thing is, we operate in a little bit of a different environment when it comes to the legal situation as well. If you're a child molester, for example, you can't live within a certain number of feet from a school or from a playground However, there's really not any protections that are out there for child care providers. So, you may very well have some folks that are known to the law enforcement community that are living in close proximity to your program or even your family child care home. So, just a couple of things about how we're unique and how this is really a different course when we teach it for child care providers versus teaching it for a university or a church or a business setting. However, all that being said, I do want to acknowledge the great work that child care providers do on an everyday basis. There's a reason why when children show up in kindergarten, they know what to do in emergencies. If you really think about it, child care providers are really the first educators of emergency preparedness for kids. So we know that most, if not all of you, have emergency plans because that's in many states now a licensure requirement. We know that you do lockdown drills and tornado drills, and certainly you do fire drills. So you're good at teaching kids how to stay calm under tough situations and how to get out of buildings or how to lock down and how to stay safe from tornadoes or severe weather. We know that you're excellent at nurturing kids, finding out what's wrong, calming children down, and making them feel better. Working with kids on field trips, making sure no one goes awry and you have solid head counts so that kids aren't running off and running wild. And also thinking about even the pickup and the drop-off that happens every day and how you manage that process. And you're also really experts at parent engagement, talking to parents, letting them know what's going on with the children, but also hearing about what's going on in the child's life from the parents. So, all this to be said, you have a tremendous amount of expertise that, this situation, the active shooter and the violent stuff, really builds on top of. I don't want anyone to think that, wow, this is something brand new and something we have to learn, from scratch. You already have a lot of these skills and you already practice a lot of these drills. So when we think about adding active shooter and violence on top of that, we really just are building on what we already have and what's already in our repertoire. So there's a few guiding principles that we want to think about when we think about active shooter. When seconds matter, help is minutes away. So the average shooting portion of an active shooter event really lasts anywhere between 1 to 15 minutes. Okay, so most of these are really short in duration. They're over pretty quickly. A lot of times, if you look back historically at the events that have taken place, there's a delay in calling 911. When you think about, Columbine, there was a delay because this was right around prom time, and people thought the gunshots were just fireworks. They thought it was a senior prank. So there was a little bit of a delay. Same thing we just saw recently down in Florida is we saw a lot of tweets, a lot of Facebook posts, a lot of Instagrams, a lot of Snapchats, but we didn't see a lot of folks calling 911. So we know that there's going to be a built-in delay, and studies have shown that that could be as much as 4 to 6 minutes. And then you build on top of that, the average police response time is around 12 or 12 and a half minutes, depending on where you're at in the country. Most of these events are going to be over before law enforcement can get there. So when seconds matter, help is minutes away. What we're really looking to do is to try to buy time, to try to stop that active shooter, to slow that active shooter down, to buy time so that either the police can show up and take care of the situation, or the active shooter runs out of ammunition, or the active shooter gets so frustrated that they leave, or maybe they commit suicide. So that's really what we're trying to do when we think about our active shooter response. There really is no worse result in an active shooter scenario than death. So there's a lot of hard decisions that you're going to have to think about, and certainly if you're ever confronted with one of these, it's going to be very, very scary. And I'm not trying to minimize that at all. But think about everything that you do, anything that you do really, is better than doing nothing, because the end result is death. So anything we do above and beyond, if we have to break a window, if we have to jump out a window, anything that we have to do is going to be better than dying. Okay. These discussions are difficult, and I'm not trying to sugarcoat this at all. It's a very difficult topic, and one, frankly, I wish we didn't have to have in the early learning space, but unfortunately, that's where we're at. And, I'm going to try to shoot you as straight as I can. Again, just trying to be real with you about how these situations evolve, because I want you to know the most information you can in case you ever are in one of these situations, so that you know what some of the best practices are. However, that being said, the odds of experiencing an active shooter are very, very, very low. You are honestly more likely to be struck by lightning than you are to be in an active shooter event. So I don't want people to, leave the webinar tonight and be scared or live in fear. That should not be the message at all. I really want you just to be prepared. And like I say at the bottom of the slide there, I'm not scared, I am prepared. Just as we prepare for fires and floods and tornadoes and earthquakes, sadly, this now too is just one other thing that we have to think about when it comes to emergency preparedness and having a comprehensive emergency preparedness plan. The other point here to make is that the principles covered, are very broad. Response techniques evolve. We study each and every shooting that happens in the United States, and even abroad for that matter, and we're constantly learning from these events so that we can be better prepared and we can be we can be responsive to what's happening. So just wanted to make that note as well. So when we think about the active shooter characteristics, there's not one specific type of profile or type of person that an active shooter is. There's really no standard profile. So, we've seen active shooters come in all shapes, sizes, ages, races, genders, really everything that you can imagine. So unfortunately, it's not as simple as just saying like, wow, this is the typical person, this is the typical mold. It's way beyond all of that. We don't know who the next active shooter might be, and that is a little scary for folks. However, they do share some common characteristics that they all seem to have. So first off, the goal is for them to kill or injure as many as possible. So when they come into a venue or a facility or a place, they're not looking with the mentality to escape often. They're coming in and they know they're either going to get killed by the police, they're going to commit suicide or something else. But most of the time they're not going in with the mentality that they're going to come out alive. Their mentality is to go in there and create as much harm and devastation and as death as they can. And they're often not seeking revenge on a specific person. They may be seeking revenge on a specific person, but if you're a stranger or you happen to be someone who's in the way, you're going to be fair game too. So it's a little bit different than kind of your revenge killings and stuff like that. Really, the goal is just to come in and run the numbers up and see how many folks that they can kill. So for us, that means that we need to implement strategies that get us out of the line of fire, that make it hard for this shooter to know where we are, that make it hard for this shooter, to target us. So anything that we can do to slow this shooter down, to thwart those attempts, to conceal ourselves, to hide or escape, is really going to be in our favor in this case. All right, so there's a few different techniques or tactics we want to talk about, and some of you may be familiar with the run, hide, fight that the Department of Homeland Security has put out. I think that's okay. We're going to explain that a little bit different here for those who haven't had that training. It's not sequential. It's not like stop, drop, and roll. It's a little bit different. So we've broken it down into 4 different buckets here, which we'll go through now. So our approach is really going to be keep out if we can. So the best thing that you can do to stop a situation from happening is to be aware of what's going on in your immediate vicinity. If you see something that doesn't look right, if you hear noises that are not familiar to you, if you have a gut reaction that just, wow, something's not right here, I've got a funny feeling about this, the best thing you can do is just remove yourself and the kids in your care away from the situation. Okay, so getting out of harm's way, or if you see something outside in your playground or in your parking lot, just not going outside, calling the police, let them handle that. Stay safe inside the building if you can. This also means for us, for those facilities that have, cameras and other types of surveillance devices, we want to make sure that those cameras are able to see our parking environments in the areas leading up to our program. We don't want the first time of us being notified that there's a problem when it's at our front door. So part of the keep out, strategy is that we're aware of what's going on around us, and we want to make sure that we know what's going on in our neighborhoods, that we're not going to be, drawn into a situation that we could potentially avoid. Okay. Now, we also have to make a decision at some point about, are we going to go, and by go I mean, are we going to try to evacuate and try to run away, or are we going to stay in our program? And this decision is going to be really based on what's happening right there at the time. So if there's a threat that's down the block from you, it might be okay to go because you might have the luxury of time. However, if there's a threat that's already, close at your door, or worse yet, inside your door, you're probably not going to have that luxury of time. You're going to probably have to do a different approach. In the child care context, this is also going to be a consideration that we have to make, thinking about the age of kids. So for those of you who are caring, for toddlers who are able to get out of a building in some organized fashion, and hopefully you're practicing that with your fire drills. If toddlers are able, and toddlers and older, I guess I should say, if they're able to get out of a building, then maybe the go is a consideration for you, where you can, run away and escape the area. However, those of you that are caring for, infants, you probably are not going to be able to escape the area, and your strategy is going to be more of that of, barricading and locking down and concealing. And we'll talk a little bit about both of those. So for those of you who do have toddlers or older children, or do have the luxury of time where something's coming, or potentially something bad's going to happen, the get out strategy may be a very good one for you. And getting out means we're going to run out of the building, we're going to get away from danger, and we're going to go as far away as we can until we're safe. So, it's very similar to your fire drill. A couple different caveats. Obviously, you're not going to just go outside of the building and then stand in front of the building. You're going to want to have a site. There are several sites that you could go to until you're out of harm's way. But really, if you can get out, if you have older kids that are able to do so, and the threat is not immediately upon you, this is a good option. It's going to take a little bit of pre-planning here, though. You're going to have to identify your exits and your windows and stuff that you can get out ahead of time. So think again about your fire drills, and just as you would do with a fire drill, there's always two ways out of every room. What are my two ways out of the room, and what am I going to do to get these kids out? The other thing is, once you get outside, you want to stay low and stay out of sight. So it's not just the same as, standing and walking completely erect. You're going to want to, crouch down. You're going to want to duck down. You're going to want to make yourself a smaller target and try to hide behind some concealment as you go along the way. Now, for kids, this is a little bit easier because they're, smaller and shorter and lower to the ground already. So they're smaller and less of a target. But for adults, we do want to keep that in mind. We don't want to just run in a straight line. We want to, kind of zigzag a little bit and take advantage of natural barriers that are out there. We also want to make sure that we conduct a head count, and when we get far enough away, then it's an appropriate time to call 911. It's not the appropriate time to call 911 as you're in the middle of trying to run out the building. That can wait till you get outside and get to safety. So the get out strategy may be something that might be applicable to your program, depending on the size and the age of the children. And some programs, it might be room by room. Some may have kids that are able to escape and able to run away, and other rooms may have infants that are not able to escape. So let's talk a little bit about the hideout strategy. So if this is escape is impractical because of either the threat is right upon you, or because you have younger children who are not able to be mobile and not able to get out in an expeditious way, the hideout strategy is probably the one you want to take advantage of. And when we think about hiding out, we're really thinking about barricading the door. We're thinking about denying entry if we can. We're thinking about remaining calm and remaining quiet. So, not just shutting the door and simply relying on the lock. We're going to shut the door, we're going to lock the door, but then we're going to barricade the door with, desks and chairs and tables and all that stuff in front of it. We're going to turn off the lights, and we're going to be as quiet as we can so that the active shooter either bypasses the room because they don't, they basically think it's vacant, or because you've done such a good job barricading that even if the active shooter wanted to get into your room, it's just not feasible because there's all these objects in your way. And when you think about if that's your strategy, especially with younger kids, I mean, this is really your opportunity to go crazy like the movie Home Alone. When you think about childcare and all the different stuff you have at your disposal, I want to see Legos on the floor, blocks on the floor, anything that would potentially, make it hard for the active shooter to walk or would trip them or make them slip. Any of that stuff is fair game when we talk about barricading the door. Another very important part we want to talk about is we never want to barricade a door with humans. Okay, so could a human tie a rope or take their belt or take their purse, tie it around a doorknob and hold the door shut? Maybe, yeah, maybe they could. But we much rather would see, taking that door and barricading it with furniture, with desks, with tables, with chairs, with cribs, with bookshelves, with, inanimate objects, whatever you have, so that, you're not putting anybody in harm's way. And when we think about the tragedy that happened in Virginia Tech, we had a teacher that was very heroic, and the teacher essentially held that door shut. And while the teacher was holding the door shut, the shooter basically just shot right through the door and killed the teacher. So, we don't want to see that happen. Again, we want to see, inanimate objects like furniture, desks, tables, chairs. Use that stuff to barricade and block the door. That way, if the shooter does try to come through or shoots through the door, he's shooting at tables and furniture and desks. He's not shooting at human beings. Okay? So a couple examples. This is a photograph of the recent shooting that happened in Ocala, Florida. And you can just see what a tremendous job they did in this classroom here of stacking everything they could possibly think about, tables and desks and books and chairs and bookshelves in front of that door. So, even if the active shooter was to get through that door or start shooting through that door, there's really no way that active shooter is going to be able to climb through all that and actually come into the classroom. So really good job there by the students in Ocala, Florida. And then this is a picture here from a recent shooting that happened in Noblesville, Indiana, where again, you see the students here, and this is in an elementary school. What a great job they did taking tables and chairs and desks and all that, and again, just barricaded up against that door. So, this stuff can be done. It needs to be thought about ahead of time, but certainly you have a lot of tools in your disposal when you think about barricading doors. And we've actually shot a video where we went to a child care program, went to their infant room and went to their toddler room and actually showed videotaped some strategies on how to barricade doors. And you can watch that video on our website over there at childcareprepare.org. So that's where that is at. And you can see how we effectively barricaded this door using cribs, and then there's another one where we moved to an infant room. So I'd encourage you to check that out, and I'd also encourage you to think about these things ahead of time in your program. We have the benefit of being in our programs every day. We know what's in those programs. We know what's in the room. We know what kind of tools we have. A shooter's not going to be that familiar with your working environment and not have that luxury that we do. So we have the benefit of time. So I would encourage you to go back to your program tomorrow and think about, if I had to barricade this door, what are the tools and techniques that I could use here? And to be honest, this took us twice. I mean, we didn't get it right on the first time, but we did get it right the second time, and it only took us about a minute or so, especially because these cribs were on wheels. It was very easy to move them. But effectively, we've barricaded this door with cribs, so the door is barricaded on this side by the door, and then all the way up against the wall. So the cribs kind of act as a brace. Basically, that door can't open because it's wedged shut with all these cribs. Something very effective that we could do, because the cribs are on wheels. It really only takes one person to do, but you got to know how to do it. You got to think about it ahead of time and practice it to make sure that you have it right. Okay. Okay. So we've talked about looking out and getting out and hiding out and all that kind of stuff. The last resort is really to knock out. And, if, again, there is no worse result than death. So if you become, eyeball to eyeball with an active shooter, you need to think about, what your options are and how you're going to react to protect yourself and protect the kids in your care. I will say in the child care arena, we have a lot of different toys and tools that we could use that would be very effective to throw at an active shooter and distract them. And, even just for a minute, that's all we really need is for them to be distracted. Too often what we see is active shooters come in and, they just shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot, and no one challenges them. And, if you think about when you get challenged, even if you have to duck because somebody threw an object at you, it makes you stop and makes you think and kind of interrupts your pattern. Another thing that can be very, very effective is fire extinguishers. Fire extinguishers, not only you can use fire extinguishers to spray an active shooter in, the face, which will severely limit their visibility and able to breathe in many cases, but also, once you've used it on their face, it's also a very, very effective club. And fire extinguishers are positioned, strategically around buildings already. So something to think about, as a last resort, if you had to, attack an active shooter to stop them from coming into your room, fire extinguisher may be something you want to consider. The other thing too is when we look back, historically at some of these active shooters, I don't want you to get the idea that they're really big and bulky people. I mean, many times they are very small, in some cases even anorexic or frail folks. So, some of the shooters have only weighed 110, 120 pounds. They're not, macho men coming in or anything like that. They're very, small and petite, and again, in some cases anorexic. They're often not trained in weapons, so they don't know how to use firearms very effectively. They don't have good aim. They don't have good, firearm skills. So a little bit of distraction or a little bit of challenge, could really tip the scale in your favor and make it an opportunity there for you to disable that shooter and then, get yourself and your kids to safety. All right, so I want to just highlight, 4 different goals as we think about goals for active shooter preparedness for the child care space. And goal number 1 is really to prevent the problems from happening and really to secure our space. And this is something we should do, not because of active shooter, but this is just something that we should do because it's the right thing to do. And, too often I find that child care programs are a little bit too friendly and a little bit too trusting. I know many of the folks we've seen child care programs have key cards or key codes on their doors. And, if that's a program like yours, if you have a key code on your door, I guess the question needs to be who has that key code? How often do you change that key code? And, what do you do if there is a situation where you need to lock a parent or a staff member or a former staff member out of your space? So I'm not a big fan of the key codes. I don't think that they're effective. If you have a system where you can, give a key code to each individual family so that you can change that or revoke that access, I think that's better. But too often I see child care programs that just have one key code for everything. And, at some point you might as well just leave the door unlocked because everybody's got the key code. So we need to make sure that we're doing, things like that. If you have control and able to, lock your facility during the day, certainly would recommend that. Certainly if you have a system where you have to, buzz people in or check them in or do some kind of a credential, a check there before they just are allowed access to your space, that's certainly better. The other big thing is we have to create a culture of safety. And part of that culture of safety is, having that awareness that we're not leaving doors open and that we are in kind of approaching people, right? So if you don't know a family member, if you've never seen an adult, if someone looks out of place, we need to have that culture where it's okay to question them and just say, hey, I'm sorry, can I help you? Or I don't recognize you. Who are you here for? Or what are you doing or something like that. Too often we see, people slip in unchallenged. And for some of you in other buildings, whether it's businesses or churches or synagogues, that can be a real problem because, there's a lot of activities that happen in those buildings, and these people may or may not be coming for your program. So, we've had some stories of people that are in the church or in the synagogue, and they're not really there for childcare, but somehow they wind up in that childcare space, and it can create some problems down the road. So thinking about ways to limit that access, thinking about ways to question people you don't know in a respectful and polite way, but just letting them know, like, hey, I don't know who you are, and kind of challenge them a bit. That's really good. Also thinking about how many access points you have. For those of you who have windows and a lot of doors, what is the procedure to lock those doors and lock those windows? Who has the keys to all that? And all that kind of stuff. So securing our space is really a big thing that we should be doing on a normal everyday basis. We shouldn't be leaving doors unlocked or doors open. And I know it gets tough and it gets challenging, especially around pickup time, because it can become, chaotic. But really encourage you to keep those doors shut. And if you can, make that decision about who the door is open for and who the door is not open for. Really, goal number 2 is kind of building off that and to involve parents. And too often, we'll see programs, especially big centers, that install a lot of different security devices, cameras, and some even have biometric, fingerprint readers and all this and that. But it's defeated by a simple, well-meaning parent who holds the door open and allows parents to tailgate. So, hey, I see you're coming to pick up your kid. I don't know you, but I just assume that you're here to pick up your kid. Let me hold the door open for you. And now, boom, this person is right in your child care program. We need to have that discussion with parents and tell them, hey, we're trying to create a culture here of safety and a culture where people just can't come into our child care space unchecked. And part of that really starts with the parents. We need you to update your emergency contact list, make sure that your pickup and drop-off lists are updated, but also make sure you shut that door so that each parent has to go through the procedure. If they have a code or they have a fob or they have a fingerprint, then let's make sure they're getting in on their own merit and we're not just holding the door open, inviting strangers into the program. Another big thing, and it's sad, but I know it's the reality that we live in, a lot of times child care providers get stuck in the middle of domestic disputes. So, a messy divorce or a custody battle or anything like that oftentimes can end up right there at the footsteps of the child care provider. And I can't reiterate this enough. Make sure on those domestic issues you get the paperwork. Because if you get a situation where the police, are called, the police are going to want to see the paperwork. Because what's going to happen is you're going to say, hey, this person is not supposed to be here. And of course, that person's going to say, well, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no proof. And then it becomes a very awkward situation where, it's their word versus your word. And you don't want to be in that situation. So work with your parents and make sure they understand if there's, ongoing family issues, custody battles, divorces, legal disputes, or just stuff that, they anticipate could potentially be a problem. Make sure you have that open line of communication and make sure you get any kind of paperwork that's filed by the police department or by the courts. That way you have it for your records, and it makes the situation a lot easier if you do have to get law enforcement involved. Another thing that we really can use parents for is to use them as another set of ears and eyes. So if a parent is, going out to the parking lot and they see someone lingering, or they see someone that doesn't belong, or they see that, my ex-husband or my ex-wife is out in the parking lot and they shouldn't be, make sure that they're comfortable having that conversation with you and really use them as a second set of ears and eyes to inform your awareness and inform what's going on. And we'll talk a little bit about that in our communication goal as well. All right, so here we go. Goal 3, communication. So there's a tremendous amount of money and resources that have been put into the local areas to try to create emergency alert systems. And I would strongly encourage you to Google emergency alerts and then your city name or your county name, because oftentimes emergency managers at the city level or emergency managers at the county level have systems that will notify you when bad things are happening. And these are beyond just your, tornado warnings or your, Amber alerts. These are text messages or emails that you can sign up for that would be delivered to you if you get on these systems. So take a look and see what resources are available in your city or in your county to get on these alert systems. Too often we find that child care providers are the last to know in communities. We've often been forgot about, quite honestly, and what we find is that parents who have older children who are in the school system will find out, and then oftentimes they will call the child care program, and that's how the child care program finds out. And that's not the best situation. It is good that the parents have that open communication, and the parents will call and make sure that you all know. But it would be much better if we could get the information, the same time the school's getting it. So look at your emergency alerts in your area. Also look at your school district and see if they have some kind of alerting system. Perhaps they would be, nice enough to allow you to get on their alerting system so that you could get those alerts as well. Oftentimes, police are just kind of overwhelmed and they don't really understand the number and quantity of child care programs and kids that you care for. So therefore, you're often forgot about when we think about emergency alerting situations. So having that conversation with your police department or with your emergency management agency can sometimes spur a change and can sometimes get you on that list. And I would definitely encourage you to do so. We also want to think about internal communication. So if there is an active shooter threat in your facility, and some of you I know are in very big facilities, how are we going to communicate that? Do you have an intercom system? Do you have radios? I know a couple facilities that have purchased air horns, and that's all they're using their air horn for is an active shooter event. So if you hear an air horn, that's a real thing, and that's what that means. We also know that a lot of times, especially now in the summer, as we hire younger staff, they're not always 100% sure if they have the authority or the power to report an emergency. So make sure you're talking with your staff about who can call 911, when it's appropriate to call 911, and how that process works. But too often we'll find that we do trainings, and a lot of the times the directors will come to our training, but they'll leave their younger staff back, at the child care program, and it's unclear to them whether or not they have the authority or the power to call 911 if an emergency were to happen. And we definitely want to make sure in this case, in an active shooter situation, that they know it's okay, to call 911. One other thing I just want to highlight, we've got a mobile texting pilot program going on right now, and it's something I would really encourage you to take a look at and sign up for if it's something that's interested to you. But we're looking at ways to better communicate between child care providers and parents. And we've got a really, really great partnership. We're really fortunate to have this partnership with Compliant Campaign, who does a lot of the emergency alert notifications for the Centers for Disease Control and for Homeland Security and these kind of entities. So right now we're piloting a program. We'd love to have you help us out and think through these issues on how we can set up a system that child care providers can quickly and efficiently send one text that will be resonated through all the parents in your child care program. So if you're interested in doing mobile texting, if you're interested in looking at some solutions, we've got a really good deal going. I would encourage you to visit childcareprepare.org and click on our mobile texting pilot program, and we'll get you hooked up with Compliant Campaign and can set you up with the texting pilot that we're doing. But really important stuff. We know that that's where everybody wants to be right now is on mobile texting, and we found out a really good and scalable and pretty cheap solution to make that happen. So, if that's interested you, please stop by and check that out. All right, and finally, the last goal I just want to hit on briefly is really practice makes perfect, and that's, more so true here in active shooter than probably anything else we talk about. We really need to think about these issues ahead of time. We want to, plan these things out. We don't want to be developing our active shooter plan during an active shooter event, obviously. So, we really want to encourage you to get together with the folks that you work with every day. And, for those of you in a center, that means your coworkers. For those of you in a family child care program, that's going to mean your family and maybe some of the neighbors that you may rely on or some of the parents that you rely on. But think about as adults, what do we have at our disposal that can help us in an active shooter situation? What are our tools and our resources? How can we barricade doors? Do we have bookshelves nearby? What could really be an asset here? And also think about escape plans. And could we get children out of here if we had to? Many of you have programs that open up onto a playground. Well, that's fantastic. Is that playground surrounded by a fence? And if so, how tall is that fence? How many gates are in that fence? And, could you physically lift kids over the fence if you had to? These are all things you need to think about, ahead of time. So get the adults together, discuss your plans and some of your strategies for dealing with active shooter, and spend some time doing that. I would really encourage you to do that before you ever think about involving kids in this process. Also really important here is that all the drills for active shooter that you're going to do, you really need to let people know in advance. This isn't something where we want to do a surprise drill because we've seen throughout the country where well intended. Folks have done surprise active shooter drills, um, but it turns out very badly, and the real police get called, and of course they think it's a real situation, and it just becomes very, very dangerous. So no surprise drills. Make sure everybody knows what's going on. If you're going to do a drill, do it in advance. This isn't the time to be dropping surprise drills on folks. It's just not appropriate for this type of drill. When you do have that figured out with the adults and you have your plan, when we start to think about involving children in the drills, again, you have a template here. So think about your severe weather drills, think about your fire drills, think about your tornado drills, and how those are going to be a little bit different in the active shooter context. If your plan is to escape the building and get outside, think about your fire drill as kind of a blueprint and how you can use your fire drill that's already existing as a method to get kids out of a building. Again, monthly fire drills are required in all 50 states. You should know how to get kids out of a building. Kids should be familiar with how to do that. It shouldn't be too much different from them. So, for them, that would be an easy way to get kids out of a building. Same thing for those of you who live in Tornado Alley or have severe weather or earthquakes. Think about where you would go, in those situations. Those are probably going to be the locations that you want to lock down in. A lot of times those don't have windows. They're in a secure, place. And again, kids know what to do. They know how to stay calm and stay quiet. And you know how to make the kids stay calm and stay quiet, and more importantly, in those types of situations. When we think about the actual messaging to the children, it's obviously very important. We want to make sure that children know in an age-appropriate way what's going on. And we've heard everything from, there's a bad person outside, all the way up to, for the smaller ones, like there's a wild pack of dogs and we have to be quiet in the hallway because the dogs will hear us, and pretty much everything in between. This is something that, you as a child care provider know your kids, obviously. You know them intimately. You work with them all the time. You know their maturity levels. You know what will resonate with them. But, think about it. And obviously kids are pretty smart. At some point, they're going to pick up that this is a little bit different than a fire drill, a little bit different than a tornado drill. We've also had some classrooms that are calling this an IOC, which stands for Intruder on Campus. So an IOC drill, which is a little bit less, a little bit less traumatic than an active shooter. So think about those ways that you're going to message that to the children. And certainly, if you are going to do any kind of drills with kids, make sure you get the parents aware of that ahead of time, and maybe even discuss that with the parents. They're probably going to have some good ideas for you. All right, so a few concluding thoughts here, and then we'll turn to some of the questions here. But really, active shooter, again, it's a very, very low likelihood that you're going to be involved in one. However, if you are involved in one, your goal is really to survive, obviously. We're going to survive by trying a few different things. First off, we're going to try to prevent the shooter from gaining access to our spot. So that means having awareness. So if you are in, if you're in your program and you hear a lot of sirens outside your building, and maybe you hear sirens and fire trucks and, helicopters and all this kind of stuff, the last thing you want to do is just, run outside and say, hey, what's going on here? You want to take a minute and say, wow, this is out of the ordinary. I'm hearing a lot of sirens. That's a good time to lock down as a precaution, right? So we lock the doors, we get the kids safe, then we try to determine what actually is going on. But, you think about, especially like some of the shootings that have happened down in Florida, where, the suspect put down his weapon and then he ran free in the community for, a prolonged period of time. Who knows how many child care programs and family child care programs he ran by during that time. And not because you're a child care program, but just because he may have been looking for somewhere to hide, he could have burst into your program. So, it's those kind of things that I think about, if something's going on in the neighborhood, I want to have awareness and I want to know, because I want to lock down my program and make sure that, my kids are safe, and also want to prevent any outsiders or any strangers from entering the program. So, think about that as well. Another big thing is again, we want to slow the person down. So the more things you can put in the person's way, the more barricades you can have, the more things that will make that person frustrated, the odds are they're going to either, try somewhere else and leave, or again, they they may commit suicide because they're just not able to do what they wanted to do. I know the trend in childcare is really to have a lot of big and open spaces, and that's great for a whole host of reasons. However, it's pretty bad for active shooter when we think about these big open spaces. So, a couple things you want to think about if you have those really big windows that face the outside and into your parking lot, or look out into a courtyard or something. Think about installing some blinds that you could close. Also, I've had programs that have installed the film that you can buy at a lot of the the hardware stores like Home Depot and True Value and Lowe's and all that. They have film that you can buy, and essentially it turns it into a two-way mirror. So you can still see out, but people cannot see into your program. So that's a pretty cheap and effective way to, beef up your security a little bit, and that way people aren't, looking into your program. You have a little bit more privacy. You also want to think, a lot about just your different escape routes and how can you get out. Again, it's going to be different, but if you do have those big windows, there is an opportunity to turn those windows into an exit, into a door. So in the event of last resort, don't forget windows can also be used to, throw a chair, throw something through that and turn that into a door and escape, or, try to get as many folks out of there as you can. So I know this is a lot of information. I know we cover this in a 4-hour course, and we're just really grazing the surface here. So I want to be respectful of that and tell you there is much, much more, and we'll continue to have this dialogue and put resources out on our website. But I do want to look at some of the questions that we have and make sure we have some time to spend on some of that. Let's see here. Should home daycares keep the doors locked? I would say absolutely. I don't see any reason why you would ever want to have your doors unlocked if you can prevent it. Now, I know some folks that are in different settings don't have access to, control whether or not their doors are locked. If that's you, I would strongly consider you having a talk with your landlord or the tenant that you're in or the building that you're in and say, hey, we'd like to have a lock on our door. But yeah, if you're in a home program, I would definitely keep your door locked. There's no reason not to. Let's see here. Oh, here's one about contacting the police. I would definitely encourage you to contact your local police. Many have local, community programs or police officer, citizen outreach programs, community policing programs that would be able to come by to your program and at least give you some basic ideas about how to beef up security, about doors and locks. So definitely look into that. Don't overlook that local police department. That's a really good resource. And the other thing that's really good about that local police department is you want them to know that you're there. Too often when we think about child care in the police context, we think about daycare. And you'd be astonished to know how many police and firemen and paramedics are just astonished that, wow, there's child care that happens beyond 8 in the morning until 5 at night. They really, truly think of it as daycare. So if you have one of those programs that have extended hours or sleepovers or whatever, it's really a good idea to make sure that your local law enforcement, your local emergency management folks know about that, because that way if they do get a call, they're going to know, wow, this is a child care program, and it's 11 o'clock at night, but there's probably still kids there. They're going to want to have that information. They're going to want to know that. Let's see. State recommends we don't keep the door locked because of a fire. That is a battle we've been having. Yes, there's a fine line between responding to fire code and being safe from intruders and active shooters and all that kind of stuff. So I do appreciate that comment. I would definitely encourage you to take a look at your local codes and even have that conversation with your local fire department or whoever's doing your inspection. They will have some ideas for you about how you can beef up your security and keep those doors shut and still be in fire code, still be okay with fire code. But yeah, it's a very good point. And remember, when we're talking about a real active shooter event, fire code goes out the window, obviously. If we've got someone that's coming in your building and shooting, we're going to do whatever it takes to protect those kids. And, that means barricading doors and doing other things. Obviously, we on a normal day wouldn't be doing that, but everyone understands in an emergency, you have to do what you have to do. Okay, let's see. So I'm seeing a lot of stuff about just, barricades and about bookshelves and this kind of stuff. And I would just encourage you, a lot of these things online, and I take this with a grain of salt, but there are some people that are out there trying to make money off of tragedy. Child Care Aware of America and National Association for Family Child Care, we're not those people. We're not trying to make money off of tragedy. We're trying to give you this information because it's the right thing to do. So you don't have to go out and buy some fancy $200, $300 security system or some, fancy gizmo that you see on TV or online to be secure. Really, you'd be amazed how many doors you can secure with just a simple, filing cabinet or a bookshelf or a crib or even just a 2x4 if you think about it. So don't think you have to go out there and be, spending all this money. I would encourage you to be creative in your programs and certainly, look at the videos we have on our website, some of the stuff we've done in the infant and toddler settings with just the tools and the materials that are in the rooms on a daily basis. You don't want to get too reliant on any one product or any one, tool or technique, because you never know when one of these active shooter things are going to happen, and you may not be in the room with that fancy $300 gizmo if an active shooter happens. So the biggest thing is be aware of your surroundings, be aware of how you can barricade doors and what tools you can use, but don't think you have to go out and spend a lot of money. That's certainly not the point of it here. Let's see what else we have here. How many times has this happened in a daycare center? Well, thankfully, we don't have any mass shootings that have happened in a daycare setting. Now, we've certainly had some, one-offs where, parents get into heated debates, and I'm sure, many of the folks on the webinar tonight have had some personal experience with divorces going messy and that kind of stuff. But when we think about a true, mass shooting, thank God, and I'm knocking on wood here, thank God we have never had an active shooter situation in a child care setting, and I hope we can always say that. Certainly the one that's probably closest to our age range is when we think about Sandy Hook and a lot of the, the 5, 6, and 7-year-olds that got killed there. But yeah, we haven't had one. We're very lucky to not have a mass shooting in a child care setting. Do you recommend using evacuation cribs to get out with infants? I think that's a great question. I think if evacuation cribs are part of your strategy to get kids out in a fire drill, if that's something that you are comfortable with, if that's something that you drill with, I say absolutely. I would definitely use the evacuation cribs. Again, you need to test that out ahead of time, and if you don't want to put infants in there, I understand. So maybe take a bag of flour or something that weighs similar to an infant, and put that in there and test it out. But yeah, evacuation cribs I think are tremendous if you can if you have that as part of your plan, as long as you exercise that and know how to do that. Let's see, what else do we have here? Sorry guys, I'm just trying to get through all these, and I'm trying to pick out the themes here. They're saying a good guy with a gun versus a bad guy with a gun. Can you speak to that, please? Well, it's certainly been a topic in the news and definitely in the media. I don't know that we're going to solve anything, tonight on this webinar with it. But there are definitely some states that are looking at, options for allowing folks to have firearms and have easier access to firearms in the school setting and even some in the early childhood setting. But when we think about these active shooters, again, there's really only two ways that they end most of the time. Now, we've had a couple of outliers recently, but oftentimes they're either going to kill themselves or they're going to be killed by police. It's not that common, but we've seen a couple recently where the bad guy actually surrenders. So that's kind of an outlier, and the community is a little, I don't want to say excited, I don't think that's the right word, but we are interested to get a hold of these shooters and interview them and find out more that hopefully can delve a little bit more into the psyche and the mentality here, because oftentimes we don't have that resource because those shooters are often dead after the shooting. So a couple interesting developments lately, and hopefully we can learn from all that. We certainly, we try to take these tragedies and learn all we can from them. Parent tailgating is an issue. How can that be prevented? Well, I think it's just having this discussion with parents and being honest with them and saying, hey, we don't want you to tailgate because this is the reason. We don't want someone sneaking into our program. And I don't know. Aside from that, I would think most parents would understand in the given climate what you're trying to do. But maybe you can implement a little system that maybe you give them. Maybe it's World Cup now, right? So maybe we give them a red card or a yellow card or something and let them know, hey, we saw that and we don't like that, and maybe have some fun with it. But I know it's very much an issue and certainly something we need to discourage in the child care program. All right. Yeah, so I see a lot of folks asking about videos and stuff. We are in the process of creating some videos. We do certainly have some in our 4-hour training that are specific to child care. We are thinking about creating a video about kind of the run, hide, fight or whatever specific to child care. Quite honestly, a lot of the issues that we have are just insurance issues. So to get our insurance carrier comfortable enough for us to have the training and conduct the training has been a little bit of a uphill battle, as you can understand. So having that video is certainly something that's on our mind and we'd like to do, and we are in negotiations with our insurance company to try to get something like that out there. So bear with us. I know it's really badly needed, and we certainly see the need and like to address that need. But you know how things go as far as that goes. Okay, well, I think that's about all we've got today. Certainly, if you had something, and I know there's some in here that are just really specific about your particular program, and it's really hard for me to address those, not seeing your program and seeing the layout and all that kind of stuff. But certainly we're here for you. So if this is something that you'd like more information on, again, I'd refer you over to childcareprepare.org, and certainly have a whole host of resources over there. There's also some other resources which I think we should think about. Your local law enforcement agency that I mentioned before is a really good source. The Department of Homeland Security does have some online videos. Now they're geared more towards workplaces, but if you Google, run, hide, fight in YouTube or on the Department of Homeland Security website, you'll get some of those. And then there's also a training going on out there called Stop the Bleed, which teaches folks how to apply tourniquets and provide a little bit of emergency medical care in the aftermath of a shooting. So definitely take a look at those. Those are out there. Most of those are, I think all of those are free, quite honestly. And I just wanted to hit these again. So a recording for this webinar will be posted at childcareprepare.org within a week. You'll be able to access this presentation and the slides on that website. Certificates of attendance, for those of you needing those, will be issued by NAFCC, and those will be emailed within 2 weeks. That'll come to the address that you registered for this webinar with. If you have questions about your certificate, contact Nicole, and that's her email there, and Hopkinson at nafcc.org. If you do not receive your certificate, please check your spam folder. A lot of times it will go into your spam folder, so check that out. We will definitely get those out to you. If you need continuing education, they are available for this webinar. To qualify for CEUs, you have to access a quiz and pass that with an 80% above. We will send information out about this within the next 24 hours. And you can also go to this website here, Webinar CEUs, nafcc.org/webinar CEUs, to learn more about that. So if CEUs apply to you, take a look at that, and that's where we can find that. Again, we do have a whole series of upcoming free webinars. So if you like this one, you'll love next month in July. We've got Sesame Street coming in. They're going to talk about Let's Get Ready, planning together for emergencies. So that'll be really fun. And then in August, we're going to talk about building your emergency supply kit. So these are all free. We appreciate you coming out and attending these. We do these at evening because that's when you told us you wanted them. You wanted to do them after work. So we're trying to be as responsive as we can for the needs out there in the field, and certainly appreciate everybody who's been joining us on the webinar tonight. If you need to get a hold of us for any questions or any follow-up or anything, again, childcareprepare.org. There's a button there to request training. You can learn more about the 4-hour active shooter course. You can learn about the mobile texting program we talked about. You can learn about our emergency listserv that you can sign up for free. You can request training. There's a big button there you can click. And you can also drop us a line at preparedness@usa.childcarewar.org if you need anything else. So that's pretty much all we've got for you tonight. It's a little bit after 9. I do appreciate everybody who stuck with us. Really good attendance tonight. And again, I know this is not a topic that we like to talk about, but unfortunately, it's one we do need to talk about. And hopefully, you've learned a little bit that you can put into practice at your program. So, thank you very much for attending tonight. Again, my name is Andy Rozak, and I'm going to be signing off now from Washington, D.C., and hope you have a wonderful evening.